Welcome to Thriving the Future podcast, where we're finding positive solutions to thrive in the tough times ahead. Okay, welcome back to Thriving the Future. So last week, we were planning a workshop. As part of the workshop, we went to a friend's land and did a site survey. So we're going to go through the results of the site survey. We're also going to include some clips that we took on site. There's a little bit of wind noise, so...
How often would you be coming out? So it's in
honestly,
words,
probably not more than probably twice a week for 2 to 3 hours, because of just my work schedule. You know, I would definitely come out for probably 4 hours over the weekend one day, you know. So that gives you an idea. It's not a lot. I don't know what I can really do with that.
Sure.
I'd love to come out, yeah, for a weekend off grid, you know. Like you said, holiday. Have clothes, have stuff out here. I'd like to do that. Further up the hill, the shelf will go up, but not as much as the...
So is that clay?
No, there's no clay.
I mean, the top 2 feet?
No, it's decent topsoil.
We have about 2 foot of soil before we hit this rock shelf. Probably more up there, so well is not easy. We do have a perk test, so that would be sewer and stuff. We're looking at...
Or if they turned around, they could run laterals this way.
We're looking at maybe 1-2 days a week here on property for 3 to 4 hours on a weekend.
Yeah.
So we don't have animals. So let's ask growing experience. What do you have experience growing?
Trees.
Tree?
Tomatoes and peppers. And you know, that's us.
How much of this would you want to make into food production?
Really whatever I can right now. I'm not opposed to anything. My only opposition is I don't want to go beyond that one building,
Right.
so that it's still sellable. You know, I won't plant trees right where I think a house would be.
Good point.
The other question would be go back to the beginning exercise and ask, having looked at this property, would you reconsider anything about it, or would you advise them anything different about it, looking at buying this versus something else?
If somebody is okay with a slab home, this is a great property, you know. But if you want to do homesteading, it's adequate, you know, at best. It's not bad. It's just if you've got to put a septic system in, it limits a lot.
Background. He has a 3-acre lot. It is in northeast Kansas. We'll include some pictures of the land, some pictures of some of the plants there, and also some contours. So this land, there's 3 acres. It's rectangular. It slopes from the northwest corner down southeast to the road, and you'll see that in some of the pictures. So us in northeast Kansas are in USDA Zone 6A. So what's the land history? 20 years ago it was pasture. 10 years ago, like most of the places around here, it was separated into smaller acreages.
Especially stuff that wasn't so great for getting the tractor in, or where the creek trees were starting to encroach on the fields, or...
Right. And then it was separated into neighbor's house, and then this land, and then another pasture. So some of the trees that we've seen, this land slopes down to the south and also to the southeast. Along the south, as you can see in the pictures, there's a row of trees that kind of go down into a creek, ravine, things like that. Some of the trees that we identified out of there's lots of hedge. There's some oak. There's lots of cedar, evergreen type thing. We've got hackberry. Some of the perennials that we identified were prairie verbena and mullein, which is cowboy toilet paper.
It's a good medicinal too.
Yeah, it's good. And as you'll see in some of the clips here, we identified the goals, and goals are very important because your goals that you have when you're looking at a land may change as you go through the process. We looked at it like, if you were buying this land right now, what would you think? And then also we covered how has his goals changed, and has his perception of the land changed. So he's had it for, what did he say, 3 years?
I think 3 to 4, yeah.
Yeah, so he hasn't done much on it, right? In the pictures you can see we burned it off as part of being out there, right? His goals are to turn around the property in about 5 to 6 years because he's going to retire.
And that burn off is a periodic
Yeah.
thing, not a yearly thing,
Sure.
and not it's part of the maintenance that he and others have done to the land just to keep the scrub and nasty weeds down.
Yep. So in the meantime, he wants to use it as a proof of concept for kind of an off-grid place. Right now, there's no water. He could put in water, but that's going to cost a lot of money. And one thing you'll see when you go out to land and you look at it is, if it doesn't have water, you could pay up to $10,000 just for them to put the meter in, even if the water comes up to the edge of the property.
And it's very common for some of the counties around here that are more on the outskirts of the big cities, that they will make the person subdividing the land put in meters and plot utility lays and all of that. And then the water company still charges.
Right. And that doesn't even include what you need to do to make it up to the house.
Right.
So,
but they consider from the meter to the house completely you.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the way it would be for the most part on a lot of that stuff. So he doesn't have anything on there right now, but what he wants to go for is a proof of concept, get a couple of shipping containers, make 2 trench footers between them, and then put a roof between it, and enclose that in.
So yeah, to let's try and explain that a little bit better. So you have the 2 shipping containers, which are 40 foot long.
Right.
So the trench footing would go under the containers. So the containers are sitting on that. Then between them, you'd pour a pad.
Correct.
And you would cover over that center area, and then put a extended roof over the shipping containers to give them shade, increase water collection,
Sure.
and keep that up. And then he can always come back and insulate some of the shipping containers, and he can put a garage door and a man door on the front of that for walking in, and skin it real cheap with some tin.
Right. So he wants to use that for rain catchment and then use that for his water, because instead of bringing it on with a meter and then running it up the hill and things. And we'll go over some of the reasons for that, because of the obstructions or the disadvantages or whatever, right? So have solar panels for power, because once again, you're going to run,
that's not definite or right away, right?
Sure.
The first idea is to put up the building, so that one, he's got a place to do things like park some equipment or store some stuff, and he's got a place to work out of. Then work on maybe composting toilet and a cooking area, and slowly build into what all it could do as an off-grid property.
Right.
As he explores the option for a future move, and also to increase the value of this property for resale value.
And then put in a compost toilet. So one of the things that you really need to look at when you're looking at a 3 to 5 acre lot is how much of that is going to be taken up with your septic tank and your laterals.
And this property did pass a perk test, and putting in laterals is a possibility. And this is one of the things that has changed in his life, right? When the property was bought, the idea was a workshop and a house. When we retire and we paid off the property and we paid to build the building, all that, we retire,
Sure.
we come out here and we, use the shop and we build stuff and we take care of things, we fix things, do some cars, things like that. And so it wasn't a big deal.
Right.
But now that he has gotten into loving planting trees and the idea of orchards and nuts and things like that, the area that the septic system would take up and the plantable area kind of overlapped so much that he wouldn't be able to do what he wanted to do planting wise.
Yeah, you could plant some things on top of the septic tank, but you probably don't want to plant most things on top of the septic
Not
tank.
trees.
Yeah, not trees, because that would get down in the septic. And then you can plant some edible things, but you probably don't want to do too much gardening on top of the septic tank.
And it also depends on how deep you can put in the septic, but that's another consideration with this land being kind of the knoll of a hill like it is and rounded, and going down to such a steep incline in that creek, is that it is mostly a rock shelf about 2 foot down, except on the real high spot. And so you have a very rocky soil as well.
So when we looked at it, once again, up towards the top, there's a rock shelf about 2 foot down. He estimates there's probably a 2 foot layer of rock. And there's quite a bit of rock that's working its way up through the soil anyway.
He dug a test hole with some equipment, and it's clear how much dirt is also eroding away because of how much of that had filled in for him.
Yeah, and that'll go into some of our design. So one of the things we did was, and you'll see some pictures of this, and you went and you took a handful of the soil, checked the compressibility by smushing it in your hand.
But
right?
you've got, so like if it will hold form on its own, there's some clay in it.
Okay.
If you can get it to, squish out water, then it's more humus because it's spongy, right? If it actually will roll like Play-Doh, you've got a lot of clay, right? And this would kind of hold together if you squeezed it. Some water may have come out if it was really wet, but it wasn't a spongy soil, right? But it was,
and it wasn't sandy at all.
It wasn't sandy, so it was a good clay-based loam, I guess, would be probably the kind of the way you describe it. I mean, it's great soil.
Yeah.
You could grow stuff in it. You're just going to have to build it up and stabilize.
Right. And you, one of the things that I found remarkable was you put it up to your nose and smelled it.
Right.
Why did you do that?
Well, because it tells you things about the soil, and you don't always. It's more partly an intuitive thing, but there are things like heavy pesticide soils have a bitter smell, but it's a distinct bitterness to the smell.
A chemically smell, right? Yeah.
It's not quite chemical, but it's very bitter.
Okay.
I've even noticed it like if you go to some place that uses a lot of the chemical fertilizers in town where they're mowing.
Sure.
But mowed grass around here doesn't smell that way.
Correct. Yeah, I've smelled that in town.
You can tell it when some guy's mowing his hayfield, how much fertilizer he put down by how sweet versus bitter that hay smell is as the wind comes across it, right?
Yeah.
It's that same bitter that you get from that in the soil. And the more heavy and present that is, the more it was herbicided and pesticided and those things. And that gives you an idea of that. This had a bit of a bitter smell, but it was more like that. Some of those roots you cut into, some of those grass roots and other things that kind of have add a bitterness from the herb, right?
Right.
So it was really good. I didn't taste this particular soil. I've done that. And I think you kind of do this by basically tasting the soil as you garden in it. As soil has improved, I've watched the taste change. And we're not talking like eating. You're just putting it on your tongue and letting it get moist and letting that flavor just kind of, okay.
Yeah, trying to see how bitter it is, right?
Right, how bitter it is, how sweet it is. But there's other components in there that I can't quite, dirt's dirt, right?
Right.
But sand doesn't really have a taste. It has a gravelly feel, right?
Right.
All those things you can train yourself to go, oh, this is closer to this garden that I had at this house or that house or that house. I was able to grow this, and that in it, right? That intuitive perception is key.
Okay.
If you can develop it, right? And you do that by, you taste your soil in the spring, you kind of taste it in the summer, you taste it in the fall this year, and you do it the next year, It will build up and become kind of a rote, just kind of known thing. You can taste compost too if you have the fortitude to deal with the thoughts of that, right? I mean, some people can't deal with that. I wouldn't.
Because it used to be poop. Yeah.
Well, it used to be poop. I wouldn't do it with a fresh manure compost or one that isn't finished, right? But that's that.
Yeah, that's one thing that's interesting. So the compost that comes from the city, from the city compost place, has kind of a oil smell to it. which I think they take the yard waste and they take the leaves and stuff and they apply something to it to get it to break down over the wintertime, because then it's for sale in the spring.
I think
But
that
sometimes
smell
it
you're
has
coming with is partially what everybody in the city is treating their lawns and their trees with, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And some of the tree services will, between each cut or between several cuts or moving from tree to tree, they will treat the clippers and the saws with a disinfectant.
Yeah.
And some do it more than others because that's supposed to keep tree diseases from moving along, right?
Correct.
And that adds up in those situations. And then I think there's a lot of people that don't take a good, but they just suck up whatever in the leaf blower or whatever, right? Or the
There's some
mulch
plastics.
mower or
There's some
all that, right?
plastics in there, yeah.
And that goes to the big compost thing, and they run it through the shredder. We've seen ones where it's clear that whoever was operating the shredder there dropped the whole plastic bag through. Right.
Yeah, that happens a lot. So
I think that builds up some of that.
right.
Stuff.
So
And the good news about that is most of that stuff is able to be sequestered through composting, right? It can get locked up in a way it's not bioavailable to plants and it's not bioavailable to other things.
sure.
Which is beyond my ability to
Right.
talk through. Smarter people than me have done it.
Right. So one of the things we saw was
Before we go on, let's cover
Go ahead.
the
Sorry.
climate info real quick, so everybody's on board with that, because we covered we're zone 6, right? But so this is for our general area, which would be northeast Kansas.
right.
You were looking at about 28 to 30 inches of rainfall a year.
Okay.
21 or so inches of snow. That's over the course of the year. And it's averages, right? So there's some more, some less.
Right.
Let's see. In our area, you have 97 days of the year are precipitation. Our driest year between 1895 and 2012 was 1956. And we got 15.39 inches of rain.
For the whole entire year.
For the whole entire year. Our heaviest recorded year between the same period was in 1951. And this is the year everybody talks about the 51 flood in Topeka, right?
Right.
41.5 inches of rain that year. The biggest rainfall in Kansas happened in 1993. Pittsburgh, Kansas got 17 inches of rain in a 24-hour period.
We got 16 inches rain
Right.
3 years ago here
Yeah, that's just the record,
in
right?
August, right?
Right?
Yeah.
The record's 17. So, you can have those rainstorms. This is an important number when you're like planting swales and stuff, right? So I have this catchment that gets 20,000 gallons of water on it per inch of rain.
Sure.
So you multiply 20,000 by 17, which I don't have my calculator handy and I'm not going to do on the air, right?
Right.
That's a lot of water. That'd break a dam. That would, if you don't have the drainage off that system at the end. So things to consider. So let's see. Look, wind. Wind is very interesting for Kansas. Between October and May, we have the windiest part of the year.
Right.
That's 7.3 months of wind. And we're looking at average wind speed of more than 10.5 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Right. The calm part of the year is May to October again. The one was October to May. This is May to October.
Sure.
The average hourly wind speeds are 8.2 miles an hour. So that's the unwindy part. I just love that.
Yeah.
For 8.6 months of the year is from the south.
Kansas means the people of the South Wind.
Right. But 3.4 months, it is from the north. So December to March 21st-ish is a north wind.
Right.
We have clear skies for only 4.8 months. June to November.
Right.
We have 7.2 months of sun. This is something to think about when you're thinking solar. So we're talking off-grid. Solar makes sense from June to November,
Right.
but from November to June, you've got a problem.
It's at least partly cloudy.
But we have a low of 8.2 months. So May to October. So we were saying November to June. So October to May. So we got the wind during that when we're cloudy for that 7.2 months. We have an average wind of 10.5 miles an hour. So it would make sense to put up a solar array, but it would make also sense to have a windmill.
Yeah, but you probably wouldn't want to do that on 3 acres. You'd probably want to.
Yeah, you would.
Okay.
If you see Missouri Wind and Solar, go look at what they've done. They have
Right.
designed a AC
Okay.
windmill that is like perfect for this situation. Small, can go on like a pole.
Right.
So we got that right. Let's see. Frost is
Last frost date is average frost date is 4/20, April 20th.
yeah, that's right. And then first freeze is usually November 27th. You're
November?
up to
Really?
first freeze.
Oh, hard freeze.
Yeah.
The first frost is usually in October, late October.
Oh, I'm sorry. It says.
Yeah.
It's what it says. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm arguing with it, but I will go check my numbers again.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So, and then the last 2 years,
you
we've had a frost, a killing frost in the upper 20s, first up to the 9th of May.
we have a 10% chance of 32 degrees in May 3rd. We have that same at April 16th
Right.
for 28 and below.
Yeah, we had 28 this morning in some areas.
Yeah, but our frost free is May 5th to September 23, and that's moving.
Right.
So we've watched a weather change. So while we are
Frost free from what'd you say, May 5th through
September 23rd,
23rd. Okay.
that's what it's 170 free frost days. I think that comes to like 22 growing weeks.
Right. So one of the things you can do in Kansas is you can get, if you do it correctly, you can get 2 seasons out. So
Right.
if you
Of
get
cold crops.
you can get some potatoes, you can get some greens and things in, and then
all your brassicas, your onions, brassicas being your cabbage, your broccoli,
Sure.
your cauliflower,
Kale.
your Brussels sprouts, your kales,
Right.
your we have prime growing area for greens.
until they start bolting and
Well, they'll bolt in the summer, right?
Right.
And then, but you've got it back in the fall, and it's a very long season, and we have a lot of greens.
Sure.
Even a lot of the weeds that we have grow here, grow
Lamb's
through
quarters.
a light winter.
Right. Correct.
So one of the things that I've been thinking about, because our frost dates are moving and our weather is moderating, is planting things that do well in 5B and do okay in 7A.
Okay.
Just testing them, right?
Right.
Because as this change happens for whatever reason, there are billion possibilities, right? There are
Right.
many, many, many. It is observable that it's at least mellowing
Sure.
or getting more even across time. So I want to bring in some genetics for the seeds that I'm going to try and save.
Correct. And where'd you get that? What does that say?
I got davesgarden.com.
Uh-huh.
I've got the weather station app for Kansas, or the weather service app. So you weather.gov
Sure.
or right NOAA.gov. I can't let's see. Got weatherspark.com. Weatherspark continued. Coolweather.net for the annual rainfall stuff, and across all those you can usually get a very, very good.
Okay. Good.
Look at
So
that
that's
climate.
our climate information, right?
Right.
Good. That's very detailed. Thanks. So one of the things that really came out was also, what do you want to do with the land? If you have a 3-acre land and it's a rectangle, you aren't going to be able to grow right up to the fence, and most people don't think about that. So say we're looking at a land, right? Say Saturday was the first time we ever looked at that land.
Let's take the first most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
He picked the right side of the hill.
He picked the south-facing side of the hill. Yeah.
Right. If he had picked the north side facing of this hill,
Mm-hmm.
he cuts probably 2 months off of his growing season
Good
for
point.
the year.
Yes.
Even though we're not the mountains, right?
Mm-hmm.
It gets really drastic in a mountainy area.
Right.
In our area, it's not as bad, but it still will, because, I mean, you can see this on people that have done a swale, right? They'll have a sun side facing and a non-side facing.
Right.
This time of year, it's really great to go look at those, because you'll have dandelions on that warmer side, and it won't be woken up on the other side, right? I've got comfrey that's kind of doing that. On the warm side, it's kind of starting to wake up.
Sure.
As you crest that hill, it gets less and less and less, down to brown leaves from last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then with everything else, you can get a microclimate, right?
Right. So if you have a tree that you want to not get the early frosts, like a peach or something,
Mm-hmm.
put that in your more shady areas, because they're not going to warm up. They're not going to unfreeze and bud as soon. Right?
Right.
So you pick the right side for growing stuff.
Mhm.
Even though what he's looking at. But you need to look at that.
Right.
How do we examine some of the sun stuff, or how do you do it?
So one way is to use the Sunseeker app. So this app is kind of like one of those augmented realities where you hold it up like you're taking a picture, and then it overlays the sun during different times of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a picture of it that I'll include in the show notes. And then so you can tell whether, sure, it looks good in the spring, and I'm going to put a greenhouse here, but then you look at it and you can see that there's a tree in the way in the wintertime. So if you're going to have a heated greenhouse or grow stuff in the wintertime, you're going to be reduced on the sun. So
This could be used several ways, right?
yeah, is your house in the way in the afternoon?
I'm building a house, right?
Right.
I want my windows to catch winter sun. I don't want it to catch summer sun. How far out from the window should my eaves go?
Ooh, that's a good point.
There are people that have calculations for that.
Mm-hmm.
But, some of us are do it on a wing and a prayer or
Right.
as we go,
Right.
especially for barns, sheds, and that. You can do the exact same thing to the windows you put on your chicken coop.
Sure.
You can
point.
decide that the chicken coop's getting too hot, so I'm going to put an awning of some kind out in front of the door.
Mm-hmm.
How far should I come out from there?
Correct.
Here's my summer, here's my winter. Well, I want it to come through the winter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got a couple beds that I put grafted apple trees in. Right.
Yeah.
So the grafts can take, and then I'll replant them somewhere else. The one that's on the far west is afternoon sun facing, and they get burned up. So not much success there. I'm going to have to move that bed. And then the other ones that are not have afternoon sun, then the apples have done quite a bit better and have made it through, and then be plantable the next year, right?
Right. So I think what we've discovered talking to Ken, looking at it, and giving him our experience from being growers longer,
Mm-hmm.
and that he was really able to see that if he had known what he was going to want now out of it, he would have just driven by, is like what he said, right? He wouldn't
Right.
have stopped. He wouldn't have looked at it, and that's something that's should be thought about. And
Well, and
it's at the classic problem of buying for who I am now, not who I'm going to become.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a good example of where you can fall into the I've already put money in it, I have to put more
Sunk
money in it
cost.
fallacy, right?
sunk cost.
Right, because you're stuck.
Right.
But what you should do is cut your losses
Mm-hmm.
and start over.
Yeah, so one of the things we learned that was really interesting, and we have a pretty good recording of what his goals are, but one of the things you have to take into account, especially on a rectangle property, is you can't build right up to the fence. There's got to be some sort of easement. There can be some underground things that go across there that you can't build on top of, right? And then the rock was a problem.
And then counties have regulations about how close to the property line you are.
Right, and how And then, yeah, there's going to be a certain amount of easement. They'll have regulations of where you can put your septic tank. And then when you divide up a 3 acre or 5 acre plot like that, with all of those restrictions and being off of the property line a certain way, you're going to end up with a much you're going to end up with much less space than what you think you will. So all these people are saying, yeah, well, I got a 1 acre or I got a 3 acre or whatever lot. That's good, and you may get a half an acre or at most an acre of growing space out of that. But if you're going to have like septic, then with all these other restrictions and trees and things, you could significantly reduce your area.
I think the main goal has become to increase property value,
Right.
begin to explore what this new retired lifestyle will be like, so that he is ready to implement when he moves.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that's an excellent way to recover the investment in the property.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for listening to the Thriving the Future podcast. Check us out on our website, thrivingthefuture.com. Also follow us on Twitter at thrivingthefute. And come join our community chat on Telegram. It has a link in the website. This podcast was produced by Scott, the Freedom Farmer, freedomfarmer.net.